We finished the last episode with the shutter timer sitting in alcohol for cleaning. It's now cleaned, relubricated and installed back into the shutter body. I've greased as many cams as I can easily get to and oiled most of the pivots in the actual shutter mechanism. As always, we're not talking about lots of oil or grease, just the slightest wipe of dry molly on the cams and an equally tiny drop of oil on each pivot, applied using a clock or watch oiler. I've had the entire unit on the shutter tester and the speeds are good enough to be left alone. More importantly, they're even across the entire frame, so I'm quite happy with all that. If I'm not having to actually take the shutter blade carrier apart, I usually sprinkle a small amount of graphite powder onto the blades and operate them a few times. I've done that in this case because they didn't sound or feel particularly sluggish, whereas the blades on my Autoreflex were dirty and sluggish when I got it, and someone had cranked up the spring tensions to compensate, which created its own problems, so that one had to come all the way apart. I've replaced the light seal between the shutter and the back of the camera and lubricated what I need to on the film advancing mechanism, so now I can reinstall the shutter in the body. Before inserting the shutter cocking drive gear needs to be engaged against the nylon gear. If it's at the other end of its travel, or somewhere in between, the shutter won't cock. So theoretically all I need to do is offer the bottom in first, make sure it's seating correctly, and then the rest will follow. Easy. I'll pop the screws in and then check that everything is still functioning correctly. Although, has anyone spotted the deliberate mistake? I haven't fitted the intermediate gear in its bridge yet. I'll get that done and return shortly. OK, intermediate gear fitted and the 3 screws securing the shutter installed and lacquered in place so they don't rattle loose. Now I can make sure everything is working by cocking the shutter, then holding the release lock out of the way. This would usually be done automatically when the mirror box is installed. Then I can fire the shutter and it remains open until I release the shutter button because I have it in bulb mode. Next, onto the mirror box. There are a few things to do on this. Replace this light seal at the back along with the mirror bumper foam at the front. All the pivot points want a drop of oil, and any sliding metal to metal surfaces and latches will get a wipe of dry molly or graphite grease. I'll use dry molly, but looking at what's on there at the moment, it was probably graphite. There's bits like this roller on the charging lever that will definitely want a drop of oil, and if I can get to them, the pulleys for the meter cord get dry and sticky, so a little flush out and relube wouldn't go amiss. If I cock the charging lever, release the mirror, and then return it to its rest position, this lever hasn't latched back into its release pawl, hence the shutter firing as soon as the film was advanced in the first episode. That's definitely an issue with the lens, so I'll deal with that later. And just for confirmation, if I pop on another random lens and charge the mirror, release it, and then return it, it latches as it should do. So I'll crack on with that lot and see you in a minute. Well, that's most of the mirror box lubricated, and I've replaced the mirror bumper foam and the light seal at the back here. I haven't cleaned the aperture control ring at the front yet, and you can hear it chattering as it rotates when the mirror goes up, so time to tackle that next. There are 4 screws to remove the lens mount. There are likely to be shims behind the mount to fine-tune the flange distance. They will probably all be the same thickness, but I always check that before going any further. So I'll carefully prise off the mount. That way, if the shims aren't lacquered in place, they should stay in their original orientation. And in this case they are lacquered in place, but I'll remove them anyway because they usually fall off as soon as you knock them. Also, any trace of lacquer needs to be cleaned off the shims, mount and mirror box front surface, because unless they went back in exactly the original place, the lacquer would change the flange distance, and you don't want that. Now would probably be a good time to remove the decorative surround, just 2 obvious screws securing this. Then there are 4 screws securing the ring that keeps the aperture control ring in place. This ring is pretty fragile, particularly as it is not a complete circle, so treat it with care. He says as he drops it. Don't worry, it only fell onto the workbench. Now to remove the control ring itself. It will become detached from the 2 arms that link to it, and they're a little fiddly to re-engage later. But these aperture control rings do have a habit of getting dirty and sticky over the years, which causes issues with slow aperture stopping down. If I get in close, you can see how grubby it is in the channel in which the control ring runs, so I'll clean that and the ring itself and return shortly. Well, that's everything cleaned. The control ring is painted with a fairly slithery paint, and it would probably work fine if I left it just as it is, but I'll rub it over with some graphite powder to make it even more slithery. This is a finer graphite powder than the one I used for the shutter, and it tends to really cling to paint well. Reinserting the control ring might need a bit of patience. The grooved post has to sit in this fork on the right, with the short plain post opposite it sitting in the fork on the left, and the long post at the bottom sitting to the right of the aperture lever down here. The trick seems to be to move the right hand fork into position with a screwdriver and insert the groove post into position. Then, keeping the post engaged in the fork, rotate the ring until you can pop the long post down to the right of the aperture lever. Finally, slightly raise the left-hand side and use a screwdriver to move the other fork into position so that the post drops into the slot. Don't expect this to go right first time. I'm not even going to attempt to film this bit because it would probably take all day to get a good clip. And not filming it was the correct decision because that worked first time. Now it's just a reversal of the disassembly process and this section will be finished. You can of course clean the aperture control ring without dismantling the rest of the camera, but it's all too easy to drop one of those shims into the camera and it might not come out easily. And for a final sanity check, that's sounding nice and crisp now, no chattering as the ring rotates. While I've still got the mirror box out of the camera, I'll quickly check the lens. I knew the aperture blades weren't moving, and I just assumed that they were stuck. But now I wonder whether someone has taken the mount off and reassembled it incorrectly. So I'll pop the mount off and see what's what. Will it be good or bad? And straight away the aperture lever inside the lens wasn't engaged with the notch in the drive lever. The blades themselves are working fine. Right, I'll put that back together correctly and test it on the camera to confirm that it is now working properly. If only everything was as easy as that. The aperture is working perfectly now. And a quick test on the camera. And this time the aperture lever is latching open once the mirror returns. Next, time to reassemble the camera. If all goes to plan, refitting the mirror box is quite simple. Offer it up to the camera body with it tilted slightly forwards at the top. It should slot into the linkages at the bottom, and as always it's easier to do when I'm not working round the video camera. Also, keep an eye on the brown wire and the meter cord. The wire should come up along the side of the timer here, and the cord should be free at the back of the camera. At this stage the mirror box isn't sitting fully home because the mirror return lever needs to be pressed against its spring to get it past the cam of the closing curtain. And then it should all slot into position. You can confirm that things are working before screwing the whole thing back together, although you do have to keep a good grip on the two halves. I probably should have said that you want the camera set at 1/1000th of a second, but you can always change that before refitting the shutter bridge by rotating the intermediate gear. And as before, the keen-eyed of you may well have spotted that I hadn't fitted the trapping blade control lever. This is one of the major hazards when concentrating on filming a video rather than concentrating on what I'm working on. Luckily I keep all the components in pill containers and all in sequence, so I found that out before I even screwed the mirror box in place. OK, small error rectified, and the mirror box is now attached to the camera body. The next steps are a simple reversal of the disassembly process, so I'll get the red and brown wires soldered back in place and the prism installed in the camera and return shortly. I've also popped the viewfinder eyepiece back in place, so it's now time to reinstall the shutter speed bridge. In theory, I haven't moved this, and the shutter itself is still set to 1/1000th of a second, so I should just be able to wriggle it into position. Before replacing the rear screw, the front post, and the compensation pulley lever, and not forgetting the on-off wiper spring too. And possibly more important, don't forget to remove that 1.7mm screw that's locking the viewfinder display in position at the moment, otherwise it either won't move or it will be very grunchy. Before I do anything else, I've popped the advance lever back on, along with the shutter speed dial, so I can check that everything is still working correctly, because it's much easier to rectify it now rather than when I've finished reassembly of the camera. And that all seems to be fine. The shutter speeds are working correctly, and it's displaying the correct speeds in the viewfinder too. So I'll get the rest of the wires resoldered and then tackle the meter cord. I probably should have left the shutter cocked indicator until I'd reinstalled the meter cord, but I think I can still work round it. So the meter cord is already round the adjuster pulley. It then goes round the idler pulley, then the compensation pulley. As always, it's a bit fiddly doing it on camera. Past the guide pulley, clockwise round the shutter speed knob and up through the cutout. Then it just needs to wrap clockwise round the cord clamp and it'll be done. I'll do that bit off camera to give me a fighting chance of getting it secured easily. Well, at least that didn't disappoint. Refitting the cord clamp was just as fiddly this time as it was the last time. In theory that won't need to come off again, so I'll pop a blob of lacquer on before I forget. I'll use the adjuster that I slackened when I took the camera apart to retension the cord, until the galvanometer looks like it's in the same position that it was before I released the cord, and then look at the manual for setting this up correctly. Assuming that the meter actually works. I didn't check that before I started taking the camera apart, but it's no big deal even if it isn't working. I won't delve too much into the mechanical setup of the meter, but with the f1.4 lens attached, the bottom edge of the movable vane in the viewfinder should more or less point to the middle of the black mark near the top of the display. Which it does, so that should do. I've popped a pair of batteries in the camera. Remember that this camera is supposed to have the PX675 mercury cells, which have a voltage of 1.35 volts, rather than the 1.5 volts that alkaline cells have. So I'm using Zinc Air hearing aid batteries, which are okay, but largely I just leave the batteries out of cameras like this. Anyway, to check the batteries, you take the lens off, set the ASA to 100 and the shutter speed to 125th of a second. Then move the on-off switch to its battery check position, and the meter needle should point to the red battery test marker in the viewfinder. If this needs adjusting, the variable resistor on the right-hand side of the prism can be moved to correct the reading, but ideally this would be done using a bench power supply set to 2.7 volts rather than trusting batteries. Anyway, mine looks fine, so on to some actual test light meter readings. Assuming you're happy with the mechanical setup of the meter, you can go ahead and check some light readings against a known light source. High lighting conditions are adjusted using the variable resistor on the left-hand side of the prism, while discrepancies in the readings at low light conditions can be corrected by adjusting the adjuster pulley on the meter cord. You can work between these two variables until the meter reads correctly across the whole range. I've already adjusted mine, but for a quick example, I've got the ASA set to 100 and the shutter speed set to 1/60th of a second. And this sheet of paper is reading as f8, which matches the reading from my Konica meter, so that will do. It also matches up under differing lighting conditions right across the range, before anyone asks. And you might have also noticed that there's quite a bit of deterioration in the mirroring on the prism. Externally it looks okay, so it's taken place beneath the paint. In practice it's not too bad, so I'll just live with that. There are also settings for the trap needle auto aperture mechanism, but I haven't had to disturb that and it's working as it should do, so I'll leave that lot alone. I'll pop the rest of the camera back together, which is yet again just a reversal of the disassembly process shown in the first video. So I'll return in one moment with a completed camera. Ta-da! One completed camera. I couldn't find anything with the correct thread, so I've borrowed the self-timer lever lock nut from my other T3 for the time being, and I've got a tap on order so I can make a replacement, assuming I've measured the thread correctly, which appears to be M7 with a 0.5mm pitch. Having cleaned all the grime off the lens, it's a bit fungusy inside, and I haven't managed to open the front group yet, so I might just substitute this earlier 52mm f1.8 lens instead, once I've addressed its obvious issues. I do have other Konica lenses, but I like to keep one on each camera where possible. As you might expect, the camera is feeling and sounding lovely as I advance the film and fire the shutter. And obviously the slow speeds are also working reliably too. I will probably do an overall camera review once I've put a roll or two through it, but for now I think that will do. If you've enjoyed watching, please like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel, not forgetting to click on the bell icon so you get notifications when future videos are released. That's it for now. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a future video.